I'm super excited today to share an episode with you with Angelo Esposito, who is the co-founder and CEO of Wisk AI. We are going to talk today about Wisk's beverage and food inventory management software. We're going to talk a little bit about Angelo's background and passion for hospitality. They're not your normal tech company. Angelo's really committed to to solving problems in the industry and is very passionate about hospitality, which is incredible. It's been around for 10 years. And we also talk about his journey as an entrepreneur and what it really took to build where he's at today, in addition to kind of walk you through the life cycle for a restaurant operator owner, what it looks like to work with Wisk from setup, which is very, very easy, how AI is incorporated in this process, and what the ongoing support looks like from Wisk AI, which I'm really, really excited about because this is not something that a lot of tech companies offer. So they really help you understand how to implement the information that they are getting from the system, which is fantastic. So a little bit more about Angelo. Like I said, co-founder and CEO of Wisk AI, dedicated to simplifying inventory management for restaurants and bars. With a passion for tech and a deep love for the hospitality industry, he empowers restaurant owners to save time and boost profits through smart, actionable items. He's got some wonderful resources too, Whisking It All podcast, a great newsletter, some awesome YouTube videos. So a lot of value in this episode. Hope you check it out. Welcome to the No Hesitations podcast, the show where restaurant leaders learn tools, tactics, and habits from the world's greatest operators. I am your host, Kristen Marvin, with Solutions by Kristen. I've spent the last 2 decades in the restaurant industry and now partner with restaurant owners to develop their leaders and scale their businesses without wasting time and energy so they can achieve work-life balance and make more money. You can now engage with me on the show and share topics you'd like to hear about, leadership lessons you want to learn, and any feedback that you have. Simply click the link at the top of the show notes, and I'll give you a shout out on a future episode. Thanks so much for listening, and I look forward to connecting. Angelo, thank you so much for being on the show today. You and I just had a really awesome conversation on your show, Whisking It All. So excited to hear when that comes out and send it out to the network. But thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got to tell me where the name Wisk came from.
That's a good one. So Wisk actually, and I can't take full credit, it actually came from my business partner, who's more of a silent partner now, but in the early days, we were together. We're brainstorming ideas. I'll admit I had some really bad names looking back, so that's why it's always good to talk to people and not just build your name in a silo. But long story short, Tommy, if he listens to this, Tommy or Thomas, but I call him Tommy. We're going back and forth, and he's like, okay, let's think about it logically. What is it? And at the time, it was really all about the Bluetooth scale. I was going to pull it up, but we have a Bluetooth scale and really around the liquor side. So doing liquor inventory, when we started, that was like the focus. And so, well, okay, what is it? I mean, it's inventory. It's a weighted inventory system. And they were like, a weighted inventory system, WIS. And I like, sounded weird. A WIS is like, WIS. That sounds good. And we kept playing with those words. Okay, what about whiskey? Whiskey, weighted inventory. So we're playing with the words like whiskey is alcohol and it's strong, like feels strong, and weighted inventory system. And then we're like, maybe SK could be like SKUs, like you're counting SKUs of items. So long story short, it was basically like a mix of all that, but the inspiration was really around the weighted inventory system because we had a Bluetooth scale that connected to the mobile app that told you exactly how many ounces are left in a bottle. And then that's where it came from. And then it evolved into, okay, Wisk sounds good. It's punchy, it's short. And fast forward, it's now evolved to a really cool name because now that we do also the food side, and 10 years later we also do food inventory, we can kind of do the play on words of like Wisk on the food side. So it ended up working out, but that was the inception of the name. It was because of that.
I love it. What were some of the other names that you came up with?
Well, I don't even want to say them. I mean, to be honest, like there were so many bad ones, but one I remember because it was like I think it was maybe either way. Even if I butcher it, it's still just as bad. But I remember one of them. I think was like something with the bottle. So basically, like it was like bottle, but like trying to make it sound nice. So I think it was like Botilo or like Bottle-o or like Bottle.io or something. Like it was so bad. And that was probably not even the worst one. That's the best part. So I probably had even worse than that. But that's the one that I remember that was really bad. But there was probably others. But all this to say, thank you, Tommy, if you're listening, for pushing us in the direction of Whisk and not Bottle-o or
I
Botilo or what.
love it. I've heard from people that they've had to go back and change their company name, and it sounds like that is just a mountain of work and
Right,
expense. So you got it
right,
right.
right.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
Would you tell us a little bit? I'm excited to share what you do with the audience today, but really
yeah,
want to dive into, you as the entrepreneur and how and what that journey's kind of looked like for you, and then dive into how you've built the company and some of
yeah.
your successes and struggles there. And then we're really going to get into the logistics from an operational perspective of what Whisk looks like behind the bar and in the kitchen. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your journey as an entrepreneur. How'd you get here?
A lot of ups and downs, more downs than ups. But no, the truth is, it's for me. I love building things out of nothing. That's what gets me excited. So the truth is, even with Whisk, and we'll get into the details, but like I love the concept of having an idea and then like making that idea into reality, and then that reality is like physical and it's people are using it. So one of the best feelings, at least I had, I think maybe most entrepreneurs go through, is the first time like a client uses your product. And I'm talking tech, but this could be maybe for a restaurant, the first time someone eats your sandwich or whatever it is. But for me, the first time I had a client pay for Whisk and use it, it was like so gratifying. So um, I think for me, I've always been an entrepreneur. Like I just genuinely love it. Like the idea of like the game, I love the game. If it's not Whisk, or if one day Whisk gets acquired, like I'm gonna do something else, and I'm gonna do something else. And before Whisk, I did something else. I did something else. So I've always worked for myself and building things, and I think I just love that. It's just in my DNA. And a big part of that, I think I gotta give credit to my dad for my DNA, because that he was an entrepreneur, and it still is to this day. And that's all my dad ever did from literally 11 years old till today. He's 73. He operates and runs a couple grocery stores, and he has a bit of real estate too, but mainly grocery stores. And for me, I grew up seeing that, and I loved it. Love the idea of being your own boss and building things and whatnot. Obviously, it comes with challenges, but for me, it was like the only way to do things. It's like, oh, this makes sense.
Did he want you to go into the grocery space?
Not really. My dad was, I gotta say, he was pretty cool about it. Like we worked there when we were younger, like part-time jobs and whatnot. If he's listening, he'll probably laugh at me, like, I worked there, like, please, you barely did any work, but no, we did work there, and two of my brothers and my sister were five kids. So all really close, 5 kids in 7 years from youngest to eldest. But
Wow.
two of my brothers and my sister operate and run those stores. My other brother is in politics, and then I'm on my own. But to answer the question, my dad didn't really push us. He always gave us the opportunity, like, hey, if you want to come in and learn and take it over one day, like the opportunity's there. So three of my siblings took it. For me, I didn't love it. Like I obviously I appreciated, I respected the hell out of my dad for what he did, supporting 5 kids and building something out of nothing. But I realized that I joke around, but like apart from maybe restaurants, like grocery is probably the only space that's harder.
Yeah.
And I always joke, but it's because and I used to tell this to my dad. I used to be like, I got an opportunity for you. Do you want to work 363 days a year, 12 hours a day? Well, I have the thing for you. And it's true, because when you think about it, grocery stores are pretty much closed depending where you live. But like, Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and maybe like one holiday, they're open 12 hours a day, right? Like 9 a.m., 9 p.m. You have so many departments. So it's not just like, oh, I need staff. It's no, I need my cashiers versus the deli versus the butcher versus this versus that. You have a lot of SKUs, right? So like even a small store, you have tens of thousands of SKUs. Like obviously, if you're a big box store, even more. But like if so many SKUs, which then translates into so many suppliers, and suppliers means logistics and dealing with it. So it's a very complicated business. I think that's the reason today you don't see so many small operators. Like I would say, my dad is one of the few small operators, especially in big cities. In a lot of big cities, you just got the bigger chains now because they either bought out the small guys or the small guys are, didn't survive. And so on one hand, I love it because it's like my dad built something pretty protected because like it's very hard to like get into the space. It requires a lot of capital to open a grocery store, like just inventory you got to buy, but very hard business. So all this to say, sorry, that was a really long way to say, but for me, I wasn't passionate about it. Like I wasn't passionate about the space, and so I just and I knew I wanted to do my own thing. So yeah, I veered off, and now that's where I'm at today.
Unlock the skills to transform your leadership with the Hospitality Leaders Roadmap. Move from ordinary to extraordinary, packed with practical strategies to lead with confidence and create lasting impact in your restaurant. Visit kristenmarvin.com/audio to download your free audiobook today.
Coaches like you are already growing their brands and attracting new clients with professional podcasts. But between scheduling episodes and audio editing, starting a podcast might feel like another thing on your to-do list. At L. Connor Voice LLC, we make podcasting simple and effective, from recording to promotion, so you can focus on your clients. You already have the material. I can turn it into engaging podcast episodes that can boost your brand and expand your reach. Discover how easy it can be to launch your show with us. Schedule a free consultation. Follow my links in the episode notes. Reach out and let's talk.
That's so awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. You don't see a lot of independent grocery stores anymore. We live in Tucson, and we've got a lot of carnicerias here. But other than that, it's big box for sure.
There you go.
Where did your passion for hospitality come from?
It's a good question because I don't have the traditional background of saying like, oh yeah, I worked 20 years in a restaurant. Like not really. Like I worked in the grocery store, which again, there are similarities, especially maybe if you're client facing and you're doing like the deli and this and that, whatever. So sure, there's some similarities there. I did work in a restaurant for a bit. So like I do have some restaurateur experience, like boots on the ground, but the majority of my experience, honestly, when it comes to hospitality was my first startup, which was like dealing with nightclubs specifically at that time. And that's where I got a lot of it. Then it led to my second startup, which is also nightlife related, but and then fast forward to Wisk. And I think my biggest passion was always just solving problems. But what ended up happening was that because a lot of my immediate circle were hospitality professionals and friends and friends of friends, so like I would be exposed to their problems. And I think in a way it was an advantage that I was like close enough. And I worked in the hospitality space. Don't get me wrong. I actually did work in different restaurants, different nightclubs, but I wasn't the guy to tell you, oh yeah, I started off as a busboy and then I did this. And then I was a manager. That wasn't really me. But what I did learn was in working in the space, I saw how passionate these people were about their craft, but I also was like not so deep that it's like, oh, this is the way it is. So I almost questioned everything. So I'm thankful for like the way it worked out. It was like I was close enough that like I wanted to help, and I became passionate because of the people in it and their love for it. And some of my best memories were in restaurants and bars. So like cool. But on the flip side, I wasn't so deep. So I questioned things. And one of the first things I questioned was seeing a friend, staff member, basically count inventory. And I'm like, oh, what's he doing? Oh, he's doing inventory with the scale. What's he doing there? No, he's just taking the bottle, and he'd have like a bottle, let's say like this over here, and he'd kind of look at it and say, this looks like 0.5. I'm like, wait, how do you know that's 0.5? Oh, it's about half. I'm like, oh, interesting. And he was writing it down. So actually I said scale, but sorry, this first time there was no scale. It was literally just eyeballing and writing it on a piece of paper. And that's where my curiosity I said, oh, you do this often? And he's like, yeah, I do it every night. And I was like, interesting. How long does it take you? 3 hours. And I was like, okay, you do this every night, so this must be important. But I'm like, maybe it's because they're a nightclub. Let me talk to other friends in the industry. And I went to other places, hotels, high-end restaurants. I'm like, for sure, they must do it differently. They must pay for it, whatever. And it turned out very similar. Like, take the bottle, look at it. It's about this, write it down. The more advanced people would type it into an Excel sheet, but like, we're still talking super old school. And that's where like my brain started turning and said, okay, there's got to be a better way. And the truth is there were a few solutions at the time. This is, 10 plus years ago. But I think, and for people listening, that this is the thing I would say is sometimes it's okay if there's solutions. Like there's probably solutions to every problem to a certain extent. So don't let that stop you. It's just, are the solutions good enough? And what I learned at that time was the few solutions that were out there, they had the right intentions, but they were so hard to use that most people ended up saying, F this, and they went back to pen and paper or Excel.
Mm-hmm.
And so my challenge was, can I create something that's easier than pen and paper and Excel and easier than these other systems so people would actually stick with it? And then that's where it all kind of began.
So how did you, like, what did Wisk look like in the very, very early days as a product?
Yeah. So early days, Wisk was really just about scanning bottles. So we started building up this database. And at the time, what I do is like I told you, in the industry. I worked in the industry, so I would go to different restaurants and nightclubs and weigh empty bottles to start building the database up. So I got at the end of the night, and at the time, Tommy, actually, the guy I mentioned earlier, now a good friend of mine as well, used to come with me to when he could, and we used to kind of weigh them together. And so the idea there was simple. We'd go weigh the bottle, scan the barcode, take a picture, and like kind of start building this database. And we knew, like, okay, let's at least try to get the common items, your vodkas, your whiskeys, whatever. We knew we wouldn't get everything, but at least that way, when a customer starts using it, they have the common items. So long story short, when we started, it was really about being able to scan an item with your phone, place it on a Bluetooth scale, and because we had the different weights, it would tell you how many ounces are left. And that was it. It was scan and tell me what's left in this bottle, because this one's kind of easy because it's just a nice shape, but there's so many different shaped bottles. There's bottles you can't see through, like the Hendrix gin, for instance, or a Malibu rum or a Clase Azul. You can't see through it. So that's the idea behind the scale. And so that's where it started. And all it did was that, to the point where it's going to sound funny now, but we didn't even have dollar values, meaning when someone counted their inventory, we'd say how much you have this in terms of quantity and ounces. But at the time, we didn't even have an input to put, like, what's the cost of this bottle? So like, what's the dollar? You know what I mean?
So then it was, they could look at it to know what to order, but they had no idea if they were losing
the value.
anything.
Exactly.
It's amazing to me that you went in and found empty bottles. I mean, I'm just thinking about like a Galliano or Louis Trey or something that never moves. Like, how are you going to?
Yeah.
Weight of that?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So what we did is, for the most common bottles that was easy to get them empty, right? Maybe, I don't know, Jameson, Jack Daniels, the typical vodkas, Tito's, Grey Goose, Belvedere, whatever. Like, all that stuff was easy. But to your point, yeah, there's bottles that we didn't. So the ones that were harder, what we ended up doing is going to some retail stores and bars as well, but weighing the full ones to build the database there. And then we would use the density to backtrack and figure out the empty weight. So Wisk was smart enough to say, okay, best case scenario is we have the empty weight. We'll tell you what's left. If we don't have the empty weight, it would pull the full weight, multiply it by the density, and then anyways, do some backwards math to figure out what should be left in the bottle.
So you created this first initial system where obviously you're saving people time. It's a, going with your mission of saving operators time and energy, right?
Yeah.
And then how long did it take you to build that, and how many clients did you have, like, in that first year of business? Just offering that.
Good question. So definitely, like, version 1 was like scrapped together. The truth is, like, it was myself kind of started it. Then Tommy was like, saw some potential. So he's like, okay, look, I'll help you out with this. I don't have a ton of time, but I'll help kind of financially. And so we outsourced it to a third-party company to build the app. The app was like pretty scrappy, but it was version 1. Version 1 was super scrappy. What then ended up happening is Chip, my now co-founder and CTO, came in, and what was cool, and I think there's a lesson here, and I think the lesson is, like, build that MVP, that minimal viable product, or I like to say minimal sellable product, because it solves so many problems. Once you're able to show that, like, I built something, even if it's scrappy and people want to pay for it, every other conversation becomes easier, whether it's raising money, whether it's finding someone like Chip, like, our now partner and CTO, whether it's, hiring new people, whatever it is, whether it's selling into new venues. A lot of problems go away when you have people paying and using your product. So definitely, like, building that MVP, even though it wasn't perfect, was key, because it helped to do many things. One of the things was Chip kind of approached us, or I forget how we got connected in the first place. I think it was through, like, Facebook, whatever. But long story short, when I met Chip, what was cool was he was looking for his next gig. He worked at, like, big companies that, raised $50 million and doing crazy tech stuff, but he wanted to kind of do something more hands-on. And so what was cool was he was like, look, I'll put money in. I want to be kind of like a co-founder. Cool, this is awesome. And I think I could take this to the next level. So it was really, really neat because he saw that restaurants were paying for what we have. He saw what we had was like, scrappy. And he had a clear path of how to make it not scrappy, but an actual product. So that's when the team started forming. Chip came in. And then now we went from, didn't happen overnight, but we went from a scrappy app to having an actual CTO on board. And that's when like things started progressing more. We started getting more polished. We started, building an actual product, et cetera, et cetera.
So as far as that next level went, when you were building this and obviously Chip's, expertise kind of came into play here, were you going to your clients and saying like, what else do you want here? Or were they coming to you going, do you have X? Help me with just beyond the ordering. How do I manage my inventory here? How do I identify problems? How did that all kind of come into play?
Yeah, it's a good question because the truth is the better you can listen to your customers, the better product you'll build. It's just sometimes, so it's kind of a catch-22 because you do want to talk to your customers and you do want to ask them, but sometimes if you just ask them blatantly, they might not tell you the truth, and they might not say, but not in a way that they're trying to be, liars. It's just sometimes like the whole, was it Henry Ford quote of like, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. You know what I mean? So it's like people's limitations in their brain could be like, what do you want? I just want this Excel sheet to be better organized. That might have been their thing, So it's you want to get that feedback, but it's not so much getting their recommendation of like, oh, I'd love if you built this. It's more pushing and understanding their pains because sometimes they don't even know what's capable, what's possible. So I think there's like a balance there. It's like you want to listen and they might have suggestions and that's great. But really what you want to do if you're really good at like understanding product is like get into their brains and understand like, what are they really suffering with? Like, and so like pushing that pain and say, okay, inventory is taking you long, but why do you do inventory? Well, I need to know what I sold. I need to know what I consume. Why? Well, because I need to know why. And then it's like, because I need to know why I lost. Why? Well, because that's if I'm losing this, it could represent a couple $1,000s a month. Got it. So you need to catch your losses. Okay, cool. And then you kind of go deeper and deeper because they might not tell you, I want you to integrate with a POS and I want you to be able to do this and I want you to be able to do that. They might just tell you their pain. So once you figure out their pain, then it's a matter of kind of, truncating it and figuring things out. Because look, at the end of the day, you're never, and I'll emphasize this to people who want to build their own tech startup or just product in general. It's never ending. Like, do you see Google stopping to develop? Do you see Apple that's like, we're good, we're not done, we're done? Like, no matter what, you're always going to be improving, maintaining, disrupting your own product, and it will never stop. There's not an end date. It's not like, Wisk, I'm happy, it's good, let's put that on the shelf, right? And the proof is, look at any product you use today. There's a team, there are people working on it. So you have to just realize that launch earlier than you think you need to launch. The faster you can get feedback from customers, the better it'll be. So like if you're not embarrassed of your product when you launch, there's an old saying, it means you waited too long. So you should be embarrassed when you launch. And then the quicker the feedback loop, that's one of the things I like to always stress to kind of new entrepreneurs, because it's one of the few competitive advantages you have as a small individual company is being able to just be scrappy and get quick feedback, because big companies take time, they release things, they're releasing things in 6 months, right? It's very structured and they have to do it like that. But as a small company, you can be scrappy. So I'd say probably those three things kind of come to mind as like when you're launching. But ultimately, yes, the better you can take client feedback generally and process that and prioritize it and read what's important versus what are people just saying they want but might not really want, the better your product will be, for sure.
The tech, I've really understood this over the last couple of years of being in this business and building a community on LinkedIn and becoming aware of all the resources. There's always been a lot of tech, but it is like alarmingly, I don't even know the word to describe it. There's so much tech out there. It's exhausting.
Yeah, I agree.
So much. I mean, it's too much.
Yeah.
How do you, and there's a lot of turnover in the industry, right? And I don't know what the percentage of tech startups in the hospitality space are that fail.
Yeah, I don't know either, but it's definitely a lot. I mean, just on an anecdotal level, like we've seen competitors when we started and we're at the same place and they're gone, and then we see the new people come in and they're gone. So that's the other tip I'll give people. Half the battle is being resilient. If you're like a true entrepreneur, just being resilient, you'll outdo majority of entrepreneurs, honestly.
So you've been in this space for 10 years. You've
Yeah.
made it through COVID. You've clearly been resilient.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
how are you staying adaptive and competitive and nimble in this really, really crazy space?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's a couple of facets. One is I think the bigger the problem you're solving, the better you're setting yourself up. So what do I mean by that? It's if I think about the restaurant space, of course, there's a million and one things that could be optimized, and I'm sure you know this too. And it could be loyalty, it could be, I don't know, optimizing a menu. There could be a million and one things, and don't get me wrong. Depending on the problem you're solving, you're facing, like you'll look for that solution. But at the end of the day, I think we position ourselves to solve a pretty big problem in that space. So if you think about restaurants, one of the biggest or the main costs, I should say, is your prime costs. And your prime cost is made up of labor and cost of goods. So by focusing on the prime costs and we focus on cost of goods, it already puts us in a good position because it's like, listen, you're doing $1 million a year, just to put a round number. Chances are about 300,000, give or take, depending on the restaurant type, et cetera, et cetera. But give or take, 300,000 is going to be your cost of goods, whether it's food or beverage. So if we're helping you manage 30% of like your business, basically, it's a pretty important piece of tech that you need. Now, the question is, okay, why Wisk? Why not someone else? So we can get into that. But I think we position ourselves to be pretty relevant. The same could be true for maybe like, staffing and scheduling or something related to labor, because that's all labor costs. So, and then the same could be for the POS. So I think the way I like to think about it is there are things that you need immediately, like a POS, maybe staffing, maybe something like a Wisk. And there's things that come later when you're getting fancy and trying to optimize that are still important, but it could be marketing automation, it could be loyalty, all super important, but probably maybe secondary or tertiary. So I would say number one is that the bigger the problem you solve, the more likely you are to, not be kind of overlooked. And then number two, it's maybe thinking about like, how do you position yourself to kind of just help the restaurant? Because a lot of these companies sometimes come into it and we bombard these restaurateurs with solutions. And to your point, it's overwhelming. It's like, what do I need to do? So the way we like to do it is just kind of say, listen, all we're doing is something you're already doing today. We're just going to make it easier. So one of our pitches, and the reason I think we do pretty well, is most places we work with are counting inventory manually, are entering their purchases somewhere. They're have recipes. Maybe they don't update it often. Maybe it's seasonally, maybe once a year, but they have their cost cards somewhere. So they're doing those things anyway. So for us, it's kind of an easier pitch because we're like, you're doing inventory. How long does it take you? Oh, it takes me 6 hours every week. Great. What if it could take you 2? Your bookkeeper's entering all your invoices and you pay them per hour. What if you just had to snap a picture? You're comparing with your PMix and your sales and looking at your inventory and trying to make sense. What if we could just integrate with your POS and pull the sales? So what's nice is we're not creating new behavior. We're like, hey, you're already doing these things. What if for each of these things, it could just be easier?
Yeah, totally. A lot of my business is built on tech, and
Yeah.
I've seen a little bit of hospitality in tech. I'm constantly shaking my fist when I'm implementing something or canceling something,
Yeah.
going, I wish there was more hospitality in this, in the feel and the transition and the number of clicks.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, obviously, your clients, your passion for hospitality, but let's go through the life cycle of what it looks like to work with you.
Yeah.
From, and we can take maybe a case study of one liquor or whatever, but talk me through and talk the audience through that life cycle of from start to finish.
So look, generally, when you sign up with a Wisk, there's 2 paths. One path is you're going full on the beverage side, so liquor, wine, beer. The other path is food, and a lot of times, if you're a full service, it might be both. But the point is, we have slightly different onboardings if it's food or beverage. So the reason I like to highlight that is because Wisk has a bar management system, and it has what we call a restaurant management system. And I highlight that because sometimes there's players in the space that basically are restaurant management, but they'll lump everything in there. So if you're like, oh, can I count wine? They'll be like, yeah, you can count your wine, but they treat wine the same way you would count, let's say, olive oil. It's just a thing. Whereas Wisk is super highly optimized. And so to get to your question, it's so optimized that we literally have different onboardings. Because if you're doing alcohol with Wisk, step 1, you'll have a kickoff call with your CSM, your customer success rep. And the first thing they'll teach you, sure, add users, connect your POS, whatever. But the first real step is doing an inventory. And there's no setup required. People are always like, okay, but do I have to send you an Excel sheet? Do I have to? No, we have 200,000 bottles in our database. Take out your phone. You can add users, add different areas, main bar, stock room, wine cellar. Everyone goes to an area, scan what you see, no barcodes, search what you see. Want to weigh it, put on a scale. You want to use a visual mode? We got you. Whatever you want. Count what you see in the order you see it. You don't have to do shelf to sheet. Just count what you see in the order you see it. You're left to right, right to left, whatever. Once everyone's counted, you submit. So that's step one. Step two, you now start scanning your invoices. Great, I got all my inventory in, but I want to now start getting my costs in. Plus, I got to get these purchases in before my next inventory so I can get real consumption data. So super simple. We train them, snap a picture, or upload it on the web, or forward it via email. But we do all the work. There's a bit of AI involved, and then there's a human review. We get all your invoices in. Cool. Step three is like, well, now that we have usage data, right? Inventory plus purchases minus inventory, we now need to compare it to sales. So because we have that POS connection automatically, the last piece missing is, hey, send us your recipes. Let us enter it for you to save you time. And then we'll show you how to maintain them so you don't have to wait for us. If you want to change recipes, add recipes, you're in full control. And then that's basically the full cycle. And then from there, we'll help them with like, more advanced things. So like that's like the setup. Now you can see your variances, you can see your losses, you have your inventory, all that. But then it'll be like little things like, hey, let's set up some cost alerts. Let's set up par levels to help you reorder. Let's set up different things. Let's look at your overstock, your dead stock, whatever it may be. Cool. Food side is a little different. Why? Even though we have 1.5 million items in our food database, there's just so much food variety that's impossible to be like that helpful. So with food, we don't start with inventory. With food, we start with invoices. So with the food side, we say, hey, step one, sure, add users, connect your POS, whatever. But the real step one is like, hey, start scanning your invoices so we can build your database. Avocados, chicken thighs, by the pound, by the kilo, whatever. Enter it. Step two, send us your recipes and sub recipes and whatever. And we'll enter those in, yields and all that complicated stuff. Okay, sandwiches or this or dishes. Cool. Now you have costs of everything in house. And then step three is like, now you could start counting. Count inventory, you're good to go. So I like to highlight that because it's kind of two separate onboardings. But at the end of the day, it's similar in the sense of you have your kickoff call. You're going to have a dedicated CSM. We have an in-app chat if you have quick questions. And then we also have a help desk to make sure you can answer any question that comes to mind.
So let's go through one single beverage item.
Sure.
What's the impact? Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So, and actually we did this. I think we have a video on YouTube and on the video, we actually took Hendrick's gin, but I'll give you an example. On average, on the liquor, wine, beer sides, on the beverage side, there's about 20% losses from overpouring, spillage, and theft, which is crazy. Because if you're selling, I don't know, iPhones and 1 out of 5 iPhones went missing, you'd be like, we got to start doing inventory because something's happening. With beverage, I feel like now people are more, understanding to it. But for the longest time, it felt like it's okay. It's part of the industry. It's normal because it's like liquid and it's hard to track. And you got many bottles and many brands and one single vodka could be used in 20 different cocktails. So it's like a very hard thing. It's not just I'm selling an iPhone. I check in the back. Do I have one less of that iPhone? Yes. Okay. It matches. It's not a one-to-one. It's not retail. It's not a t-shirt. It's one single vodka, shots of vodka, singles, vodka soda, vodka martini. And, that vodka martini can have 3 different vodkas that you decide to use, right? So super complicated. So the idea with Wisk is we took a video and we went into a venue and we have the concept of a partial inventory. And it's exactly what you kind of alluded to. But if you don't want to be overwhelmed and you want to say, does Wisk really work? You can literally pick one item that you want. Let's say in this case, we picked Hendrick's gin. You scan it across the venue. So maybe you have some open ones at the bar, or maybe you open your fridge, you have a few, maybe you have a few in the stock room, whatever. Count it, submit it. Because we're pulling the sales, life's good. End of the shift, you count your Hendrick's gin again, and you will get an automatic variance of how much Hendrick's gin you're short. So what's amazing is off one single bottle, off one night, sometimes it'll be something like, I don't know, $100, $120, $150, obviously depending on the volume of the place, but something pretty substantial, like 10 ounces short, right? And what you quickly realize, wait, that was one product, one night. Imagine that product over a week, a month. And then more than that, imagine all my products. And so you start realizing, and the math I tell people to do is look at your monthly sales, let's say in beverage, and just do the math and figure about 20% losses. If Wisk can help you capture 80, 90% of that, is it worth it? right? And most of the time it's like really worth it because you're spending a couple $100 a month to save a couple thousand a month.
I love that you're getting real time um, end of night reporting. If I was a manager, I would love to take that information right to the bartender and go, hey, here are opportunities tonight. Let's track Hendrix and let's come back to this tomorrow night, assuming it's the same person or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And empower the team to see that. Because I think sometimes what happens, what I've seen in the independent space is when you come in and you want to start putting systems in place, like you've said, a lot of people that you work with are already taking inventory.
Yes.
But then when you actually start looking at the numbers and then you go back and ask the bartenders to either use a jigger or to be more mindful of their pouring, all of a sudden it feels real corporate and it's weird. So I think there's a way to go about this to empower the team to say, let's offer a consistent product.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we're giving the customers value consistently every single time.
Exactly.
And then if they want to give something away, obviously come up with a comp tab system or something like that.
Exactly.
So you've got everything set up. Maybe it sounds like it takes no time to set up 1 shift, 2 shift, or it depends on how quickly the operators get you all the information.
Exactly.
To put in the system.
Yeah. That's really the biggest thing is how, so we say on average, just to be safe, we always say, okay, 4 weeks setup, or we say 4 to 6 weeks setup. But the truth is, if someone's super organized, like you could be set up in a couple of days. Why? Because you do your first inventory, you start scanning invoices, you do your second inventory, send us your recipes. We spend a day, 2 days mapping that. It's like, all right, in 1 week, you're fully set up. But even at that, what I explain to people is even if it takes a week to get you fully set up, it's not like you're not getting value. You're still doing your inventory. You're still scanning invoices so you didn't have to process. So at every point, you're still offloading things. But then once you kind of go through that full cycle, I like to say 3 inventories is a good number because the first one is like your first one, maybe you saved a bit of time, whatever. Your second one, you'll see like a time saving. Your third one, now it's like, okay, now I'm really loving it. And then it usually gets flat by the fourth one. So a good example might be like, let's say it takes you 6 hours to do inventory. Your first time with Wisk, maybe it takes you 5. And you're like, oh, I thought this was going to be so much shorter. Don't panic. We teach our clients, don't panic. It's normal. First time use an app, maybe you're adding new products, whatever it is, you're getting used to it. Second time, maybe 4 hours or 3 hours. The third time or fourth time, that's when you hit like that all-time low. Let's call it 2 hours. And then it stays consistent. And you're like, wow, I went from a 6-hour process and now it consistently takes me 2 hours, which is a very real number. The reason that I'm using a 6 and a 2 is a recent case study of a client was 6 hours every Sunday, and now it takes them 2 hours every Sunday.
Wow. So where does AI come into play here?
Good question. So one of the main places we're really leveraging AI is on the invoicing side. So what happens is you're dealing with supplier invoices, beverage and food side. Food side is even more complicated because you have so many products and so many formats. Beverage, yes, you have so many products, but it's usually 750 ml, 1 liter, like a case of 6, case of 12, maybe 24. Like it's pretty standardized generally. Food is just like a free for all. You know, you're buying things by the case, by the pound, by the kilo, and sometimes the same product can come in a bag and a this and a that. Like there's so many variables. So the way that we leverage it is we're using like large language models to identify certain suppliers and patterns we see. And so historically, we used to just use basic OCR, which is still cool, object character recognition. So like it would pull the letters on the page. But now we've evolved over the last few years, and because we're using these large language models, we can actually detect patterns, but also things that are maybe unique to that invoice. So for example, if and you've probably done this when you work in restaurants, but you receive something and you scratch it out because it didn't actually come in, or you change the number because they said they sent you 5, but you really got 4. Well, it'll pick all that stuff up. So say, okay, cool. It's not just going to try to pick up that 5. It's going to see it was scratched out, or it was going to see it was, X or whatever. So that's where it comes in. And because it gets better and better, it reads as much of it as possible in a fast and accurate way. But then we have real Wisk humans review it. The reason being, if one thing's off when it comes to inventory, then everything's off. If I entered the price per pound, but it was really per case, like then my recipe's off. And then this is like it's a trickle effect. So that's why we really take it seriously. So as much as the AI makes it like pretty instant, we have a Wisk human review it, and then they approve it.
I love that. I was going to ask you about that because the example I gave earlier is assuming that the bartender was over pouring, right? But it could be an error in the system, right? In the
exactly.
industry, for sure.
Exactly.
So once everything's set up, the operators are getting really comfortable with the system. Are you providing support and helping them figure out and understand what to actually do with all this information?
would say it's like, guys, we're in the hospitality space. We have to think like a hospitality company, right? Like think about a restaurant you go to where you get treated well, they remember you, they care about you, they preferences, et cetera, et cetera. And so we do act very much like that, and we're very, very big on that. One of our fundamental things is always like, we're here to give restaurateurs their time back to focus on the things they love. So we always keep that in mind. So sometimes if we get lost in the weeds, we're like, wait, is that achieving our mission of like giving people their time back? So it's a lot of the decisions we make revolve around that. That's why we're one of the few companies, for example, that does the recipes for them. It's not because we want to, it's just we're like, hey, if we really believe in that philosophy, let's be honest, let's take this off their plate. So we said, okay, part of the onboarding, send us your recipes, we'll enter it for you, then we'll show you how to maintain it. So everything we do goes along that. When it comes to support, we have an average response time of 3 minutes. So super proud about that. And then our average score is a 9 on 10. And the reason is we have direct chat. So of course we have phone. Of course we have a help desk that's like actually up to date. Because I know some people have a help desk and it's like, you know, last update was 18 months ago. Like we have, like it's literally updated weekly. So you search, I don't know, the name of POS, they'll tell you how to integrate it. You search QuickBooks, they'll show you how to integrate it, whatever you want. But on top of that, we respond really fast. And the idea, again, going back to giving people their time back, is sometimes as a manager, as an owner, you implement Wisk, but the worst thing that happens is your staff is like, hey, boss, I can't scan this bottle. Hey, boss, how do I scan the invoice again, right? And now it's like they got a new job. It's like, man, I hired Wisk to save me time, but now all of a sudden I'm the Wisk ambassador. So we make it clear to be like, talk to your boss about what you want. But anything Wisk related, unless you want to complain about us and go to your boss, fine. But anything Wisk related, go through the chat. We're right there. We answer within 3 minutes. Just go to the chat because most of the time those simple questions will just tell you. Oh, hey, I have a duplicate. What do I do? No problem. This is how you can emerge an item. Hey, I got this modifier. This is what you could do. Oh, when I buy my fish, we lose about 20% because we clean it. No problem. We have yields. This is how it works. We're in a good spot now that like Wisk has an answer to almost any product question, or I would say most product questions, because it's been 10 years and we haven't stopped improving the product. So it's just a learning curve. And the idea with the support is like, we don't want the manager to have to take on one more thing. The idea is like, once they implement Wisk, they have a dedicated CSM, they have the kickoff call, they have a few calls after that. And then we do a monthly check-in. And to get to your main question, which is to help them understand the data. So it's like, this is where you're losing money. This is how much money you're losing. And to give them actions. For example, hey, yes, you lost, I don't know, $2,200 this month, but a big chunk of this is from Jameson. So this is what I recommend. We have a partial inventory feature. I recommend this Friday, count your Jameson. Hey, someone's overordering these two products. What I recommend is blah, 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 blah. This has been dead stock for X amount of time. Why don't you make this a special during your happy hour because it's been sitting on your shelf for 7 weeks and it's just money sitting on your shelf, So things like that where it's like, okay, how can we turn the data into like practical and actionable advice, basically?
I love that. We're kind of wrapping up on time here.
Yeah.
Short on time. What's next for you guys?
Great question. It's Wisk evolved quite a bit. So the truth is, when we started, bar inventory, super focused, super laser focused on that. It then evolved to full beverage management, which was like, okay, people were happy with inventory, but they're like, what about my orders and my invoices and the POS integration, and the recipes? So involved into all that. Then, and I'll be honest, we knew one day we wanted to add food, but the truth is COVID was kind of the catalyst to that, because during COVID, most bars and full service restaurants were closed, but quick service and fast casual or takeout was open. So we're like, okay, let's pivot, let's add food. It was a blessing in disguise because now we have full food and beverage management, food inventory, food ordering, food invoice management, recipes, yields, sub recipes, like all the complicated stuff that people need on the food side. So right now we're at a point where like we can confidently handle everything on the cost of goods side. I think what's next for us is like just getting better at what we're doing kind of manually now, which is that monthly check-in and helping them, like guiding them. Because we have nice reports and dashboards, but where it's kind of a manual, like, hey, helping them and like showing them what they can do. If we get to the point where that's a bit more automated and they get a push notification or they get an alerts or something like that, that's one area we want to go. But ultimately, the vision of Wisk is to become almost that Siri for your operational side of anything cost of goods related. So like, hey, Wisk, what should I order today? Hey, Whisk, am I running out of anything? Hey, Whisk, question for you. I'm going to meet with Cisco today. Can you tell me how much chicken I bought in the last quarter? Break it down by, you know what I mean? It's like getting that information delivered to you, I think will be like the next evolution of Whisk. But for now, we're really just hyper focused on giving people value in terms of cutting down their costs and really just getting them more money in their to their bottom line. So how do we lower that cost of goods percentage so really they can take more money at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think, what, as you were just saying that, what kind of came to mind for me was a weekly automated report from AI to say, okay, here's all the information that from the inventory and what we did to operate last week. Here are the recommendations. I take that, I look at that, obviously always, add the human element to it. And then I immediately take that into my operations team and go, okay, let's talk about what we did last week. Where are the hot spots? Let's measure it. And then have AI continue to be like, okay, here's what you focused on last week. Here's where you moved the needle, or here's where you didn't move the needle. So it's proactive, and reactive at the same time.
100%.
You offer so much value and so many resources with the company. Would you talk a little bit about the show and your newsletter?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. So yeah, quick plug, like we're super passionate about just helping hospitality in general. So I always tell people like someone taught me this and it stuck with me, but the idea is like if one day the dream for Whisk is to have, 100,000 paying restaurants, then it's like, how can we help 1 million restaurants for free? So it's like whatever the pool is of people and community we help for free, cool. Maybe 10% of them are paying for our software, but everyone else is just enjoying free stuff. So having said that, as we kind of went with that approach, we launched a podcast over a couple of years back, and it's called the Whisking It All podcast. And it's really, we get anyone and everyone from the industry, whether it's other tech companies, people like yourselves who are experts on leadership, marketing experts in the hospitality space, whatever it may be, even just operators. So people who are like, hey, I own 22 restaurants, like let's pick their brain, cool. Just to give back. So the idea is like, that's totally free. It's called Whisking It All. If you just go to whisk.ai and click on podcast, all the episodes are there. And I'll have all the links. So if you want to listen to it on Spotify, if you want to watch it on YouTube, Apple, whatever you want to do, all the links are there. So that's one, Whisking It All. Ton of good content. We have an episode with Kristen. So for those who want to hear more on leadership, check that out. We have a newsletter. We have actually two newsletters. One is on LinkedIn called the Restaurateurs Digest. Super simple. Every Monday, started this year. So, I don't know, whatever many weeks we're into, that's how many newsletters are basically out. But super simple, kind of just quick learning from anything and everything related to just hospitality space. So that's a nice one where it takes 3-4 minute read. And it's super helpful. Anything from staffing, labor, kiosks versus mobile ordering, this, that, just hot takes and just like interesting stuff on restaurant operations. And then we have our website newsletter, I guess our general Whisk newsletter with 25,000 subscribers and growing. And that one has a ton of content. But one of the things that we really do is help take away some of the best learnings and takeaways from our podcast guests and put it into a nice, short, concise email with clear bullet points. So that was a pretty powerful one. And then, newsletter, podcast. And then last is probably YouTube. We got a YouTube channel. We're always uploading videos there, product videos, case studies, just regular educational stuff. So again, the easiest place, just so I give you one central place, is just whisk.ai, because we have the podcast links, the resources there, the white papers, lead magnets, whatever you need. We got it all. So yeah, hopefully people could check that out. And then for anyone who wants to connect on a personal level, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So Angelo Esposito on LinkedIn. If you want to chat, if you want to pick my brain, I'm totally open to it. And then if you have a restaurant and you're curious about inventory and you've maybe tried systems and are not happy with them, I always tell people it's worth at least a conversation. I'm very much a no pressure guy. So like the very worst case is you walk away with at least an idea of what's possible, even if you don't end up using Whisk.
Yeah, I love to tell clients that too. Just go have a conversation, go through the demo. Even if you don't work with them, you can take something back to your business and implement something. So there's value everywhere.
Exactly.
Angelo, thank you so much for your time. I know we've spent a couple hours together today.
It's fun.
I'm inspired by your passion for hospitality and your success as an entrepreneur. And Thank you for working so hard on solving problems and thinking like an operator. I think some platforms are built for the CFO and some are built for the operator. And
100%.
you guys definitely are. Awesome. All right, everybody, that's going to do it for us. Please go check out Wisk AI. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you, and connect with Angelo on LinkedIn. And please share this episode with anyone that you know in the industry that could benefit. We will talk to you next week. Thanks so much.